Hello and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our final session of HR Grapevine's HR Tech 2024 event, all about the battle between technology and performance management. My name is Sarina Hathatua, and I'm the Business Features Editor here at HR Grapevine, and I have the pleasure of being joined by Karis Lambert, Brand Marketing Manager at Moorepay, Michelle Hobson, HR Services Director at Moorepay, and Ant Brassington, Chief Product and Technology Officer at Moorepay. And in this special panel discussion, our experts debate how performance management is impacted by both HR professionals and HR technology, and whether one comes up on top. But before we begin, there are a few little housekeeping bits to go over. So there will be some polls appearing on your screen throughout the session. So please do get involved and have your say. And we will also have a chance to answer some of your burning questions at the end of the session in a Q&A. So please do have a think and let us know your questions in the widget on the side of the screen. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Karis to get us started. Thank you, Karis.
Thank you so much, Serena. I'm going to share my slides now. So hopefully you can see those okay. Yeah, so welcome everyone to Moorepay's talk. Before we get right into the talk, I'll just get my slides. I'd just like to mention who Moorepay are for anyone who doesn't know us. So for anyone who aren't familiar with Moorepay, we provide payroll and HR software, as well as outsourcing services to UK businesses. We've been around since 1966, so quite a while, and we have all the accreditations you'd expect and an excellent rating on Trustpilot as well. Our promise is to make payroll and HR easy, and here's how we do it. So we've built payroll and HR software that's very easy to use, intuitive, easy to access, and easy to trust. We deliver quality services, including the highest quality outsourcing, and all of this means worry-free compliance for businesses. On the bottom of the slide, you'll see some of the businesses who trust us to take care of their payroll and HR. And also, happily, we're award-winning. So we've won the Rewards Payroll and HR Software of the Year Award in 2022, and also CIPP's Payroll Service Provider of the Year in 2023. But that's enough about us. Let's get into this webinar. So, of course, it's HR Tech, and conversations are all centered around technological innovation. As HR leaders, we want to embrace the ever-advancing technology that can streamline our workload whilst helping us manage our employees as well. But the premise of this webinar is, can technological innovation ever replace the need for real support from real people? What are the benefits of human connection in the HR world? And on the other hand, what has HR tech enabled us to achieve that we couldn't do before? So today we'll be debating who will win the battle when it comes to performance management, technology, or real people. In the ring are two senior leaders from Moorepay. So as Serena mentioned, our Chief Product and Technology Officer, Ant Brassington, will be fighting the technology side of our debate, as he's responsible for our software development at Moorepay. So Ant's had over 20 years experience in the tech sector and is responsible for our whole product lifecycle within Moorepay for all our products. So covering product roadmaps, strategy, research and development, marketing analysis, and release management, amongst many other things. And on the other side, our HR Services Director, Michelle Hobson, will be fighting the people side of the debate, with her background leading Moorepay's outsourced HR services, including our HR and employment law and our consultancy service. So she has over 20 years experience in operational and strategic HR, with a strong business partnering background and a strong understanding of the current challenges faced by senior HR leaders, potentially like yourselves. And they're going to battle it out in 3 rounds. And at the end, you can discover which will win when it comes to creating a good employee experience. The rounds are number 1, peer feedback, number 2, performance appraisals, and number 3, empowering employee progression. And as Serena mentioned, you'll also get to vote per round on who you think has won that round, and we'll share the popular opinion at the end as well as our own conclusion. Okay, so it's round 1. And the question for Michelle and Ant is, does peer feedback need to be software, or can it be done with just people? And I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can see Michelle and Ant's faces a little bit more.
Thank you, Caris. I'll start on this one. And just for a bit of background, Ant and I have worked together for the last 7 years, and this is probably an ongoing debate that we have. So it's great to be able to talk today about it. But specifically on this question, looking at the benefits of peer feedback, I think utilising peer reviews gives such a great insight into team performance, strengths and weaknesses, and how individuals are doing. And using actual people to get this feedback in some kind of face-to-face environment, it really helps give a richness and depth to the content. I think it allows for questions, for clarification, for understanding, and there can be a bit more of a natural flow to the conversation. And I think it's particularly important if you as a manager, as a peer, have got some constructive or development feedback that you need to pass on to that individual. It can be more handled with care. So I think there's a real strong argument to having that personal element to peer feedback.
I think there's an element of truth in that, definitely, Michelle. I think, though, when you think about it, used alone as a measurement of performance, peer feedback can be really left open to bias, and in the best case, that might be, an unconscious bias, but in the worst case, employees can be competitive. They can negatively review each other for personal gain. If there is a known role that's available, there's nothing to stop somebody writing something that might not be quite true or, extending the truth. I think the other thing is on top of that, employees are not always trained to give feedback, so therefore, even well-intentioned feedback, there is a risk of damaging engagement with poorly worded constructive feedback. What we think is, a good conversation or a good sentence of feedback might actually be taken the wrong way by another employee. I think the other thing is, for me, the biggest part of this is feedback is a time stealer. Even when you digitize it and you've got systems for employees in large teams, hours and hours can be lost to feedback. Is this a good use of all of their time? I mean, we can use technology definitely better to gather feedback without forms, whether they're written or whether they're, in a system that's well structured.
Yeah, I think I would agree with not everybody being well trained to give feedback. And I think that's something that we as HR professionals need to take on board around the softer skills that need to be trained into people and helping them do it. So when you're setting up a process for something around peer feedback, that there needs to be training on those soft skills to make it more truthful, more impactful, and more real. I think in general, looking at human benefits, though, nothing beats knowing that you've done a job well done. It's an inherent trait in probably all of us to want to know that we're doing the right thing, that we're succeeding in what we're doing, and that what we're doing is being recognised by people. And when it comes from an actual person as opposed to a form being filled in, it can just feel more personal, genuine, and I do think it could have more of an impact on them. And kind of following that on then to look at softwares. Obviously, I know there are benefits to softwares and it can help with certain elements, and AMP will battle out that part, but I do still feel that it can take away some of the human element, especially when you're giving someone kudos for it. It can just feel like a tick box exercise. And I've heard sort of personal feedback in my career where, we have places that people can go to give this feedback, and it can just feel a little bit impersonal. And not something that feels genuine. It's just putting those processes in place, but making sure that the feedback, when it is sought, it is given fairly and given genuinely, and people can do that in a better way in some instances.
Yeah, I take that on, and I take on the tick box exercise. You know, the last thing we want to do is have a tick box exercise out there. Traditional feedback methods have always been structured in a way that makes it easy to collate and report data, especially if it's digitized. But you're right, they can, you know, act as if they are a tick box exercise for employees. They think they're going through a process of just, you know, doing some simple feedback and ticking some boxes. I get that. I think there's a reliance on those employees using those feedback tools. I think not all employees will engage with them. And, you know, not all team members have the same agenda. So, you know, what box they tick is up to them. I think humans' emotions don't know the boundaries of the workplace. You know, what we do at home, it comes to work. And that can negatively impact any feedback and recognition. And I think, you know, as tools like Gen I tools, you know, powered by things like ChatGPT, as they mature, it makes it much easier now to drive insights from disconnected and disparate data sets. No longer do you need that traditional feedback method. You don't need a form. You can use things like Teams, you could use Outlook messages, you can use documents, as well as all of your HR apps. And I think, you know, the ability to search employee names, making a whole load of connections across all of these data sets and having it summarized in written text is, you know, a real advantage. It starts to allow, you know, companies to reduce the time spent on feedback. It helps reduce bias by taking away specific questions or specific tick boxes. And what it does is it allows employees to just use the tools that they're using every day, such as Teams, and we can bring that into feedback. You know, how many times are employees just having a chat with each other on Teams, on Zoom, on Google Chat, whatever tools they use in the office, and just saying, that was a great job. Those aren't recorded. The ability of Gen AI allows us to mine that data now, and it allows us to bring it back and put it in really simple terms to the managers and the reviewers. And I think that's really, really powerful.
Yeah, great. Thank you both. Some very good points on both sides. And yeah, I'm very intrigued to see in the poll what everyone thinks on this and which side, or, you know, even if you think both are, yeah, have valuable points, please do put your votes in. I'll share my screen again and flash up round 2. Okay, so in performance appraisals, is technology or human connection more useful? And I'll go back to Anton and Michelle on the screen now to discuss.
Yes. Thank you, Caris. Performance appraisals have been around for years now, and sort of very early on in my career, I was part of the paper-based performance appraisals on an annual basis, worked through it moving into software. So I've got a lot of experience of how these appraisals have developed over the years. And whilst appraisals and appraisals in technology and software do have a part to play, I think it's really important not to lose sight of what they're actually there to do. I'm a big fan of continuous performance appraisals, and I do believe that most people should be having regular one-to-ones or check-ins with their managers, and whatever format they follow, whether they're a quick grab a coffee in a seating area or they're a more sit-down formal in an office where you go through objectives. I think it needs to be a balance of them, but those regular continual check-ins, whether that is face-to-face or even if it is over some kind of technology, but there's a human connection there, I think they are really powerful. So there's a thing to say that these additional potential annual appraisals can feel a little bit more stilted and forced because you've been having those conversations throughout the year. You as an employee feel you know where you're succeeding, you know where you need to development. Having that appraisal and putting it in some kind of, again, I'm using the phrase like an automated process or a tick box exercise, it can just take away the richness of it. And it can also take away from the need to it to be a continuous and ongoing dialogue. Some people can go to the extreme of thinking, right, well, because it's in a system, because it's a process I need to follow, I just need to make sure that I have ticked that box. I have given my employee their feedback, given them a rating, and we'll all move on again till the next year. I think there's a danger with that people need to make sure that they're having those rich ongoing conversations. And again, just not losing that human element of what people need to know about the answer to how am I doing in my job.
Yeah, I agree with quite a lot of that, Michelle. I think it's interesting over the last sort of 20 years that I've been in HR tech, the technology that supports the whole review process hasn't moved on massively, except in the last probably 12, 18 months. But you know, the change in process from the annual appraisal through to the one-to-ones, it's got to a lot of businesses. There's a lot of businesses using, you know, continuous performance, but we've got to remember not everybody uses still continuous performance. You know, we still have to assess an employee at the end of the year if we're going to use that performance rating for a metric for pay, or a metric for promotions, you know. And still, we got to remember not all teams are structured in a way where one-to-ones are a regular thing. You know, think of shift workers, for example, where they may see a team leader and they might get check-ins with the team leader, but with their manager who performs an appraisal, they might not see them for weeks and weeks and weeks because of the way that their shift pattern works and their shift pattern falls. I think therefore appraisals are, you know, still an important part of the process. They've still got to be that single chance for those employees who don't get the regular one-to-one check-ins, to have that conversation about things like progression, career development, what their, you know, their aspirations within the business.
Yeah, I think again, sort of, I completely understand that point, and it's just feeling like we have been through, as you said, the same sort of performance review cycles for a long time now. We're starting to gather momentum, but I still think there's a lot of education that needs to be done with businesses out there from an HR perspective about how to make these the most meaningful process, and keeping that human element to it. And then sometimes HR software can perpetuate that tick box exercise, and the need to process some form of appraisal in a system and the accompanying reminders with it, it can just sometimes feel like an admin burden. We have all got a million and one things to do today, and it's great that we put things in software to help us automate this, but it can just feel like an overload sometimes. And adding in the performance appraisal to that, are we really getting what we need out of it? You don't want to reduce the real importance of the performance appraisal, the continuous feedback, which is just generally a space for feedback, a space for reflection, and for planning to development, which to every employee in your organisation, it is really important to them. And I think we've got to remember that people are really integral to performance reviews. In Moorepay, we get a lot of our customers help asking for us to help them from a HR perspective, look at their performance reviews, how we can help them with their process, whether that's more paper-based or software-based. And a lot of the time, the customers forget to do the softer skills element of it. And we're kind of suggesting to them, like, how are you training your managers to do this? How are you making sure that it's an effective conversation, that they're pitching it at the right level? So we're always encouraging them to think of the human element to it. And the truth is, you know, without your manager or boss's acknowledgement and review, and having that sort of people element to it, what is the point of this process? It is all around the people. And great managers with those skills that we always encourage and look to add in, it can deliver really motivating, effective reviews, and that can really impact the performance of the business going forward. So just making sure that the richness of that process is found in the people who perform those processes. I also think it's just an important nuance to sort of remember that whether it's on Teams, Zoom, or actually face-to-face, there's a real need to understand what is being unsaid in that room. I'm sure we can all think of times as managers or HRs where you're having a conversation with an individual in something like a performance review, and you're looking at them thinking your body language is not matching the words that you're saying. Having those conversations and adding it in around some form of process helps you get the truest picture of that person and helps get to the bottom of what is going to help them going forward, and allows you to just see a lot more than what is just written down in front of you.
Yeah, and I think it's really important what you just said there is great managers have great conversations, but not everyone starts off as a great manager. And I think one of the issues that you get is it is a people-led process, right? But the success of that conversation depends on the skills of the manager. You know, you come back to things like body language and understanding what's not being said. That can have a hugely negative impact as well as a positive impact. So we've got to be really careful about, you know, making sure that our managers and our people leaders have the tools and the skills to actually have those successful conversations. And I think, you know, technology allows us to do more than one thing. It's not just about recording an appraisal. It's about what tools can we use that allow our managers to, you know, understand, you know, the softer skills, the understanding, the how to have a conversation. Again, you know, you start to think about how AI and Gen AI can start forming around those conversations. Because it's conversational, it can actually help, and you know, it can help train our managers to be really good. How to have a great conversation with somebody is something that can be learned from other managers, but how do those other managers behave, etc. All of that can be given to those managers that need the help and those that are moving into management at the same time. I think the really key point is that, you know, people leaders' capabilities lead to different experiences, and that can be overly positive or overly critical. And I think the biggest risk we all have is bias, whether it's unconscious or not. And that's one of the things that technology helps us with. And I'll come on to that a little bit. And I think it's important that we say, you know, although it will help us with bias, it'll never eradicate it. And there's reasons for that. And I'll come on to those. I think the piece around software and appraisals and how that helps the managers, especially those who aren't great at having those conversations, is it gives them a uniform approach. It sets a consistency across the business. It helps them understand the whole process. And I think that's from setting automated reminders, you know, loads of, as you said earlier, right? Everyone's busy. Everyone thinks that they've got more important things to do quite often than an appraisal process. But actually having those conversations within the time frame is important. It's important to the business to A, understand where we are, A, understand how we're performing against our own objectives. Now, those might be personal objectives, they might be job-related objectives, but ultimately they are the business's objectives. And I think the whole piece around the tech and the driving of workflows helps us frame those conversations so that those people leaders are having them at the right time with those colleagues and in the right way. And I think it also creates an accountability for those managers to support their reports in this area. You know, it also ensures best practices followed, especially if you build up those workflows so that they've got all the instructions, all of the help that the managers can get. I think, you know, that's a lot about what's happened in traditional performance software. And I think trying to record everything in one place is really difficult. It comes back to your point of, is it just a tick box exercise? Am I just putting something in a system which basically comes out with an output and says, I might get a pay increase? I think where this really starts to change is the way that Gen AI helps us. You know, a Gen AI chatbot can be given to people leaders, and it can be the tool to ask a really simple question. You know, how has John or Janet X performed this year? And basically on the back of that question, it can come back with a text summary of all the connections of performance data in the business. It can go off and look at revenue. It can look at margin. It can look at personal objectives that have been put in a system. It can look at all of the things that you've come up with. And it brings back a conversational piece of data. And that's where the manager starts, a conversation based on data. And I think that's really, really important. It doesn't only improve the ability to get insightful data, but it improves those conversations. They're now not based on a number of questions set up in a workflow that you designed 5-6 years ago. They're based on a whole bunch of business data points gathered across at the point in time that manager asks for them. And I think that's the point, you know, where we say it will reduce bias. However, it won't ever eradicate it completely, because we've got to remember, you know, Microsoft have fallen over this. McDonald's recently have fallen over this. Gen AI bots use large language models. They go out and they pick up data points from all over, whether it's external or internal from the business. You know, typically here we'd be looking internally, but you might have some data points externally, and they learn, and they're learning from us. And of course, because people are biased, the AI bots pick up that bias. So there is an element of training and nurturing of the bots that you have to do to ensure that you get these conversations. But the starting point is a much, much better starting point than just an HR form.
Yeah, thank you both. Some very fascinating points in that round as well. Everyone get your votes in the poll, and the next one will be open soon. Cool, I'll share my screen for the final round. Great. So round 3 is on how does technology or real people empower employees to take progression into their own hands? Okay.
Yeah, so thank you. Development is obviously something that's important to a lot of people in the organisation, and something that we should all be focused on. How do we create talent in the organisation, get the right pipeline of people? Once we get people into the organisation, how do we keep them? How do we take them on that journey and get the best out of them? And of course, software is intuitive and clever, but it can miss some of the key ingredients if it's solely relied upon. It can think, if you look at it from having quite a black and white approach to development and missing out some key nuances on individuals. No two people are the same. You'll very rarely find two people that would develop in exactly the same way. Even where you have career paths that are mapped out in your organisation, everyone's journey is going to be a little bit different as to how they get there. And I think it's really important to accept that, and to make sure that even within processes that you have some wiggle room, some different paths, looking at different ways to doing this. And that's where I think the limitations of software can come in. It can assume a little bit too much that there is a certain route for people, and they must follow that. But it also lacks having things like bringing to life inspirational leaders in the business for other people who can look up to and aspire to be. Real life examples of development and having people who've been through that development on their own, even if their journey is not exactly the same as yours is going to be. But it's about allowing them to have the platform so that others can look up and aspire to be them. Real life examples of development, people who can mentor and coach other employees is so invaluable in the organisation. And even with the best tech in the world, if you don't have these inspirational role models and a way to bring them to life outside of technology, people won't really know who, how, where to progress, and it may stop them doing so. And I think that's why it's so important for driving progression at a people level, at that kind of basic grassroots level, whether that is just providing role models for the team or having managers or mentors who help employees navigate their own individual path for development and allowing them to have some really rich conversations about it.
Yeah, really good points. I think mentors are really, really important, and those inspirational people. I think there's an element of clarity though that people don't get from that, of what's next for people. Role models providing that inspiration are great, but that inspiration doesn't tell somebody how they got there. I think mentoring can help, but mentoring takes time, and mentoring takes time away from the business. So you've got to have a real push and a real policy of ensuring your mentors get the time to spend with your people. I think in large organizations or even small complex ones, tech is a great communication tool to show the relationships between roles, departments, and what career pathways they are. It also gives accountability, for KPIs and metrics on those KPIs, so that you know how you're tracking against any sort of objective that you set, and then that can back up decisions such as promotions with data. I think it's all very traditional. I think the more it's changed recently is about Gen AI, and I keep coming back to this because the reason it didn't change for the vast part of the last 20 years is performance data has been performance data. We've traditionally stored it in an HR application. It might be a best of breed talent or performance appraisal system, but we've typically just stored data about the review process, and it might have some objectives, there might be some one-to-one data. I think what's really changed now is the way that Gen AI gives us, and traditional predictive AI, gives us much more data to look at. It's not just about the HR data points anymore. We can look at a person as a whole, and that means we can go out and we can look at individual people's social media, for example, their LinkedIn, for example. And what that allows us to do is we start looking at them not just as a functional skill set, but the whole person. We can start looking into that juxtaposition that they might have, where they have a conflict between what's happening in their personal life and what they do at work. And what I mean by that is it will align not only to their functional skills, but their personal aspirations, their values, their beliefs. Think of an example, and this is quite an extreme example. You have an employee who might have, started work in a fast food restaurant chain, for example, and they work in finance or logistics, but in their personal life, they're actively engaged in environmental activism, especially things like deforestation. Yet the supply chain of the restaurant is known to be a contributor of deforestation. The employee is likely to have that internal conflict, right? They absolutely want to be, against the deforestation, but the place they work for actually, contributes in some way along the supply chain. Now, what an AI Gen AI bot could do is it could actually show them, based on what was there in their personal values, is there's the ability to move into things like environmental projects that employee might not even know exist, or that they've got sustainability roles within the business, again, that employee didn't know existed. And what that can do is it can suggest career pathways and training and learning that can get that employee into there. And that allows us to start being a lot more proactive and actually tailoring our career pathways to what the employee really values, which is not only their functional skills, but their day-to-day values. And I think the really interesting part is, as leaders, we can use this data, but also the employees can use this data. Now, that was a really extreme sort of example. Typically you wouldn't find somebody who was who was an activist, an environmental activist, signing up and working for a fast food chain, but ultimately they might want to change from within. So these tools can also be used in the recruitment process, because think about it, the performance and the career pathways doesn't start once you do an appraisal. It starts at recruitment. When you're selling the job to your candidates and prospective candidates, the career pathways are an important part of that. And I think, where the conflict is more nuanced, which is where most of us are, the AI can bring an interesting element to that employee so that they can show insights to them, which they might not have been known were available, but actually are more tailored towards their personal goals. And I think you get more out of that. And I think this is a really interesting area of where HR and the whole performance area is moving to.
Yeah, I think it's so important that you've talked specifically about AI on this, because it's not something that any of us in HR or all around the world, but specifically talking about HR professionals here, can or should ignore. It's going to prove so pivotal for us all as time progresses. It has already made such gains, and I think it's important that we embrace that. But we need to embrace that with being aware of potential pitfalls. It's not without its limitations, and it's the things that I've been talking around, the human element. The AI can lose that human element, and it isn't always right, just in the same way that people are not always right. And we've got a real need to educate people on this as AI is coming so rapidly. I think there's such a sense, and I see this among younger generations, of believing everything they see on the internet. And I speak as a mother of teenagers, and I find it quite frightening what they see on TikTok or on other social medias, and they see it's true and haven't yet developed that need to question things. And is this right? Am I looking at it in the right way? Even on a daily basis, and I don't know how they come up on my social media feeds, I see AI generated images, say of something like the royal family, and I straight away think that doesn't look like a real image. And the amount of people that are commenting saying, "What a beautiful photograph! How wonderful to see!" And it's quite amazing to see that it's having such an impact on people already. So AI needs to be handled really carefully in the people sense when we're talking about HR. I agree that it's got a lot to bring, but it needs to be done so with a careful approach, with education. And if we blanket applied it, I really do think that integrity would be a real impact in the working world of HR. So absolutely, we need to embrace it. Even if people didn't want it, it is coming, and it is going to be transforming the way we do things. But it really needs to be with that caveat of understanding that it's not always right, and looking at the potential pitfalls and looking at ways to overcome them, so you can balance out things that AI may not bring. And that's where the human element would certainly come into things like this.
Great, thank you both. A fantastic third round for that one as well. Okay, I will share my screen and we will go through the verdict of this debate. Great, so who has won? I'm going to reveal the poll answers. So in round one, which do you think was more successful for peer feedback? We got a vote of, in third place, technology, 0%, that's very surprising. In second place, real people at 42.8%. And in first place, a combination of both with 57.1%. In round two, which do you think was more successful for performance appraisals? In technology was third place with 0%. In second place was real people with just 20%. And in first place was a combination of both again, but with 80%. And then finally, in round three, we're seeing the same pattern again. So in third place, it was technology with 0%. In second place, it was real people with 22.2%. And in first place, again, it was a combination of both with 77.7%. So, yeah, well done, both of you. You've obviously evened out the scales and, yeah, given everyone the same conclusion that, of course, we were going to come to. Yeah, so you might have guessed from what we've discussed, there were so many great points raised by Michelle and Ant in this debate. And of course, Moorepay's conclusion has to be that both elements are integral to effective HR processes. So yeah, in our opinion, neither HR technology or real people can work alone to ensure the best success. HR software augments the existing people processes, supporting HR professionals and elevating their work. So with software, we enjoy more structure. We obviously enjoy that helpful reminders, the streamlined processes, the record keeping and reporting on performance management, and other HR processes. And with support from real people, employees get all the benefits that connection and expertise and guidance can provide. So I just wondered if, Michelle, you have a final thought on this.
Yeah, thank you everyone for listening. I hope you found the debate interesting. I think one thing to say is that Ant and I really are on the same page about this. We've both got strong feelings on either side towards our respective functions, but it's something that we agree on in terms of pulling it together. Being in an HR function, I will always push and stand up for the personal element of processes and the importance of not losing those personal elements. But in exactly the same way that I was saying, AI is not foolproof and it can't be trusted in its entirety. The same is said for people. And you need to balance both of them out. I think HR functions must embrace technological change and move with it, or they will risk being left behind. And although it can make some things feel like tick box exercise, it does allow us to add value in providing structure to processes and helping automate things that can sometimes be quite time consuming. So there's lots of important ways that technology can support HR, and the two working together is a pretty powerful tool.
Thank you. Yeah, and Ant, did you want to give your closing?
Yeah, I mean, similar to Michelle, I would back that up. Without people, the technology piece doesn't really work. Even with the even with Gen AI, it's moving at such a pace. You've got to wrap people around it, because as we saw with McDonald's recently, when something goes out and starts reading what people have put in the public domain, it can turn nasty very quickly. So I think there's a whole element around that. The whole point of the whole performance piece, the most important piece of it, is the conversation between manager and their reports. That is the real understanding of what are the business objectives and how do I fit into that. It's not just about a piece of software that says I did this X amount through the year and I completed all of these objectives. It's about understanding where that then fits in the whole piece of the business and where that then can take me on my own career, whether that's in this business or whether it's another business.
Yeah, great, thank you. Yeah, obviously I agree with both of you and think you shared some very intelligent insights that everyone will be taking away. So we've just got a few minutes left. I just wanted to share these takeaways for anyone in the audience. We'll be sharing these as well, I believe, after the session as well. But we've got a brochure on our HR software and HR services there, and also our report on what's hot in HR based on our own research. It's an independent report which is full of fascinating insights if you'd like those. And yes, feel free to visit our Knowledge Centre for some more free advice and resources from our HR and payroll experts. There's guides, past webinars, more brochures, blog articles, etc. But I thought we'd just squeeze in one question from the audience before we sum up. So there's a question from HRBP at Capcom. What role will HR professionals play if companies deploy AI for performance management? So who would like to start on this one?
I'll start with that. I think HR functions have got an absolutely critical role. AI is clever, AI is intuitive, but the truth is it cannot be built alone without a people element to it. And the HR teams that know that business, that know the way things are run, that know the people, are going to be absolutely key in building it. And they will need to be part of the whole process of not only how it's built, but how it's then deployed to the organisation. There needs to be a buy-in from the organisation. When we were talking about Ant's extreme example before about, understanding somebody working in a fast food chain who's got environmental, sort of a background, that can be done for good, but you could also imagine how that would make people nervous and think, well, if you're looking at that, are you going to jump to the wrong conclusion about me and not use it for good? So there's a huge comms piece that will need to come with deploying AI in software. And then I also just think in general, using any kind of software in HR, if it is allowing things to be easier, more automated, they're still going to need to be monitoring, but it frees HR function up to do other things. There's lots more places they could add value. There's always going to be a place for both.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think the biggest piece with AI is training them. We've learned ourselves internally that you can point AI at data. It will bring you some interesting results, but not necessarily the ones that you want or you want to expose. So training the right questions and ensuring you're getting those expected answers is the right thing. I think the other thing is as Michelle said, the comms piece, because effectively, by using things like AI, you're starting to look at, am I profiling my employees? Now, when you start mentioning things like profiling, people start getting worried about it. We're all being profiled all the time. Apple are doing it to us all the time. Google are doing it to us all the time. We all accept it, but in the workplace, it's subtly different. People are a bit more, resistant to it. So I think there is definitely a place for HR. I think HR functions will change slightly. There is going to be more emphasis on the technology and how we use it. But still, at the end of the day, we're managing people. And we've got, there is still a people element of managing people. The bots aren't going to completely take over.
Yeah, very true. Great. Thank you both. So that's the end of the webinar. Now we've timed out, but I hope everyone listening has had a really good session and has got some insights to take away. And yeah, thank you, Ant and Michelle, for speaking, and thank you very much to HR Grapevine as well for hosting us.
Brilliant. Well, it certainly was neck and neck there at some points in the debate, and some very convincing arguments from both sides. So final thank you to our partners at Moorepay, Karis, Michelle and Ant, and for that very interesting and topical debate. And thank you to the audience for tuning in today and in participating throughout the entire 2-day event. I think we can all agree it was a successful occasion. So thank you everyone, and please do enjoy the rest of your day.